I was raising money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation again. And because of some publicity after the Badwater race, I got invited by a rich dude I'd never met to crash in his absurd palace on the beach. Was it generous? Sure. But let me tell you something, man. It didn't move me. I wasn't impressed by his 7-figure luxury. I wasn't there to sip cocktails by the infinity pool. That house wasn't my reward. My reward was waiting for me at the finish line of Ultraman. But I was grateful to show my mom a taste of a better life. She'd been through more shit than most people can even comprehend. And when I got a glimpse of something good, I made sure she got a front row seat. But that didn't mean I let myself get soft. That $7 a month apartment we used to live in, that place is still tattooed on my brain. I might be in Kona, but my mind stays in the grind, down the gutter, paying rent on the pain I crawled out of. That's how I keep my edge sharp. The race started on the same beach as the Ironman, but this wasn't a spectacle for the masses. Just 30 competitors, every one of them savage. It was so small I could look every single one of those motherfuckers in the eye. That's when I saw him. The hardest man on that beach. I never got his name, but I'll never forget him. He was in a wheelchair, ready to take on Ultraman. No excuses, no pity, just raw fucking determination. Man, that's the kind of mindset this race demanded. It wasn't about the beach houses, the glitz or the glory. Ultraman was about one fucking thing: finding out if you've got the guts to push past everything you thought was possible and step into the pain and then own it. He had a presence that hit like a sledgehammer, the kind of presence that demanded attention without a single word. This dude was massive, not in size, but in spirit. From the moment I started in Buzz, I've been searching for people like that. People who didn't just exist, but thrived in the discomfort. People who chose to live with an uncommon mindset. Not just when the stakes were high, but 24/7, every single day. The truth is, I was disappointed by some of the guys I met in special operations. Sure, they were tough when it mattered, but too many of them clocked out the moment the mission ended. I wasn't looking for part-timers. I wanted to be around savages. People who lived for the grind, who bled for the challenge. And didn't give a shit about how hard it got. That man on the beach, he was one of them. He had every excuse in the world to stay home and chill, but there he was, ready to go to war with the hardest stage race on the planet, using nothing but his 2 arms. That's what ultra racing is about. It's not about talent, speed, or flashy gear. It's about heart. It's about waking up every day and saying, let's fucking go. After Badwater, I was hooked on this world because it never lets up. Every race is a gut check. Every mile demands more than the last. It's a relentless assault on your mind and body, and I thrived on it. But let's be real, I wasn't exactly ready for Ultraman. I didn't even own a damn bike. 3 weeks before the race, I borrowed a high-end Griffin from a buddy of mine. The thing was custom built for him, and he was bigger than me, which is saying something. His shoes, freaking clown size. I stuffed them with socks and tape and hoped for the best. Mechanics. Forget about it. I didn't know how to change a tire or fix a fucking chain. But I didn't have time to sweat the small stuff. I rode over 1,000 miles in those 3 weeks, waking up at 4 a.m. to knock out 100-mile rides before work. And pounding out 125 miles on the weekends, followed by marathons. No excuses. Swimming, though, that was a different story. I barely trained for it. 6 swims total, and only 2 in open water. In Ultraman, your weaknesses get exposed fast. And that 10,000 swim wasn't just a wake-up call. It was a fucking beatdown. It should have taken me 2.5 hours. Instead, it took over 3. My wetsuit chafed my armpits raw within 30 minutes, and every stroke felt like grinding my skin against a cheese grater. The salt water tore me up from the inside too. I puked at least 6 times, and the current dragged my ass all over the Pacific. What was supposed to be 6.2 miles turned into 7.5. When I finally staggered onto shore, my legs were jelly, my head spinning like a damn carnival ride. I puked again, this time behind the bathrooms, while the other athletes were already hopping on their bikes, ready to attack the next stage. A 90-mile ride through scorching lava fields. And there I was, still on my knees, questioning every fucking thing. Why the hell am I doing this? I'm not a triathlete. I'm sick. I'm chafed. And the first part of this ride is straight uphill. Why do you keep doing this to yourself, Goggins? Because that's what it takes. This is where you find out who the hell you really are. When your body says quit, when your mind screams no more, and you stand up anyway, that's when you earn the right to look in the mirror and say, you're a bad motherfucker. I sounded like a whiny bitch, no doubt about it, but whining wasn't going to get me anywhere. I needed to get my shit together, find some comfort, and hem my damn vagina before this race left me in the dust. While the other athletes transitioned like pros, I stayed in my own world, focusing on one thing, staying in the fight. Step one was calming my spun out brain. I forced down some food, slow and steady treated the cuts under my arms, and swapped into fresh bike shorts and a shirt. I didn't care if it wasn't what the hardcore triathletes did. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here to dominate. 15 minutes later, I was on the bike climbing into the lava field, still puking every few miles, but moving forward. That was the mission. Keep going, one pedal stroke at a time. My stomach was wrecked, but I wasn't about to let that shit stop me. The first 20 minutes were a puke fest. Eat, puke, drink, puke, repeat. I gave myself one job, stay in it long enough to find my rhythm. That foothold came about 10 miles in as the road rose toward the shoulders of the volcano. My legs started to remember what they were built for, and my head cleared. That's when I spotted the other riders. Dots on the horizon. Targets on the radar. One by one, I reeled them in, passing them like a man possessed. Every victory was a shot of adrenaline. Each one made me less sick, more focused, and harder to stop. When I started that 90-mile stretch, I was in 14th place. By the time I closed in on the finish, there was only one man ahead of me, Gary Wang, the race favorite. As I hammered toward the end, I saw him with the Triathlete magazine crew being interviewed like he had this thing in the bag. None of them expected to see my black ass charging in like a freight train. Their heads snapped toward me as I blew past. This was the moment I'd been dreaming about, the chance to be in the fight for an ultra win. My expectations weren't just high, they were fucking stratospheric. The next morning, we lined up for stage 2, a brutal 171-mile bike ride through the mountains and back to the coast. Gary had a teammate, Jeff the Land Shark Lando, and the two of them rode together, working like a damn unit. Meanwhile, I was out there solo, figuring out the course on the fly. By mile 100, I was 6 minutes behind, grinding for every second. Man, my mom and Kate were my lifeline. Running support like champions, they handed me water, dew packets, and protein drinks on the move, making sure I kept my energy and electrolytes dialed in. I wasn't the same guy who melted down on Myplex and Ritz crackers in San Diego. I had my nutrition game tight now, and I needed it because the biggest climb of the day was staring me down, daring me to quit. But mountains are where I thrive. Pain is where I do business. When the road steepened, I dropped my head, gritted my teeth, and hammered harder than ever. My lungs felt like they were inside out. My heart slammed in my chest like a war drum, but I didn't back off. I crested the climb with my mom, shouting from the car, David, "You're 2 minutes off the lead." Roger that, I growled. I locked into an aerodynamic crouch, let gravity take the wheel, and tore downhill at over 40 miles per hour. That borrowed Griffin was a beast, and I made it sing. My eyes locked on the white dash line, my form laser focused. When the road flattened out, I kept the hammer down, holding 27 miles per hour and closing the gap on Gary and the Land Shark. I could feel them on the hook, pulling closer and closer. Then, boom, front tire blew. Before I even knew what was happening, I was airborne, launched off the bike, somersaulting over the handlebars like some kind of fucked up acrobat. The world slowed down just long enough for me to realize this was going to hurt like hell. Then time sped back up and I slammed into the pavement. My right shoulder crumpled on impact, the side of my face scraped the asphalt, and I skidded to a stop in a bloody heap. I rolled onto my back, gasping for air. My brain scrambled. My mom hit the brakes hard, jumped out of the car, and ran over to me like a damn superhero. I was bleeding from at least 5 different places, but I didn't care. My shoulder was jacked up, my elbow and cheek were dripping blood, but nothing felt broken except for the essentials. My helmet, which was split clean in two, my sunglasses, shattered to bits, and my prized bike dead on arrival. The culprit. A damn bolt that pierced through my tire, tube and rim like a bullet. But I didn't have time to sit there crying over road rash or busted gear. My mind locked onto one thing, the bike. I'd been sloppy again. No spare part. No clue how to fix a flat, no tools. What I did have was a backup bike sitting in my mom's rental car. A clunky, heavy, soul-sucking piece of shit that didn't even have clip-in pedals. Not exactly race-winning material, but it was my only option. I called for the official race mechanics, desperate for a miracle, and every second of waiting burned like acid in my veins. By the time they rolled up, 20 minutes had evaporated. And guess what? They didn't have the gear to fix my Griffin either. Great. So I climbed onto that backup bike, teeth grinding, and got back to work. I couldn't let the weight of bad luck slow me down. No time for self-pity. My mission was simple. Keep going. Finish strong. Get within striking distance. Because tomorrow was the double marathon, and in my head, I was already the best runner in the field. That was my edge, and I wasn't going to waste it. 16 miles from the finish line, redemption came roaring up behind me. The bike mechanic had fixed my Griffin. I ditched the clunker and got back on my warhorse, hammering down the road with fire in my gut. By the time I crossed the line, I clawed back 8 minutes, finishing the day in third, 22 minutes off the lead. The stage was set for day 3, and my strategy was brutally simple. Go out hard, break them mentally, and build up such a massive lead that when I hit the wall, and I knew I would, they'd be too far behind to catch me. No backup plans, no pacing tricks, just raw, savage aggression. I started running like I was trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, pushing so hard I wanted them to feel my pace in their bones. I wanted Gary and the Land Shark to hear my splits and just quit inside, to know they were racing for second, because first place was already mine. But ultras are a cruel game. They don't care about your plans, your grit, or your pain tolerance. I knew the wall was coming. It always does. The question was whether I could stay ahead long enough to make them give up the fight before it hit me. Spoiler alert. That's not how it played out. At mile 35, I was deep in the pain cave, and it was uglier than a pile of shit on a hot sidewalk. I wasn't running. I was limping, staggering, and cussing at myself with every pathetic step. By mile 40, I saw those motherfuckers' crew chiefs roll up like vultures circling a dying animal, eyeballing my broken-ass form. My weakness was out there for everyone to see, and Gary and the Land Shark were licking their chops, ready to feast on my misery. The miles, they dragged on like a bad hangover. Every step was like getting kicked in the balls by life itself. Time wasn't just slipping away. It was bleeding out, second by second. By mile 45, I got a small break. Gary blew up. He hit his own wall, and I saw him fold like a lawn chair, but the Land Shark, that cold-blooded bastard, wasn't going anywhere. He was still on my ass steady as hell, and I was out of fucking ammo. No fight left in the tank. No tricks up my sleeve, just a heap of raw pain and regret dragging itself toward the finish line. By the time I stumbled into downtown Kona, I'd lost it. My lead evaporated like a puddle in the desert. The Land Shark didn't just beat me. He schooled my ass. He ran his race, played it smart, and took my damn soul in front of everyone. I crossed the finish line first in the run, but guess what? That clock doesn't give a shit about your pride. It doesn't care about how hard you tried. The math was simple. I lost the overall race by 10 minutes. 10 damn minutes, second place. Runner up. Watching the Land Shark celebrate while I stood there empty and pissed was like swallowing shards of glass. You know what the bastard taught me, though? He taught me to stop being a dumbass. From day one, he stuck to his plan, ran his race, and waited me out. Me. I burned through my fuel like an idiot, thinking grit alone would carry me. Strategy. Backups, fuck that, I didn't have any. And I paid for it. In the SEAL teams, we use backstops when we're navigating. It's not just a tactic. It's a lifesaver. You plot your route, but you also plan for when shit goes sideways. You pick landmarks, roads, rivers, cliffs, things that tell you, hey, dumbass, you missed your turn. Time to reassess. Backstops force you to adapt before it's too late. They save your ass from your own stupidity. That's where I screwed up in Kona. I didn't set backstops. I didn't reevaluate when my plans started going to shit. I just kept pushing, hoping grit would cover up my mistakes. Newsflash, it didn't. That's the lesson. You can't muscle through everything. Sometimes you got to be smarter than the pain. When you're an enlisted guy and hearing an admiral wants a word, your mind doesn't just race. It sprints. The chain of command exists for a reason. Admirals don't casually call up guys at my level for a chat, and the fact that I was about to walk into Admiral Ed Winter's office made my gut tighten like a vice. I sat there in the hallway, nerves fraying by the second, running through every speech, every interaction, every damn moment where I might have stepped on my own dick. I knew the recruitment gig had come with a spotlight, but maybe I'd let it shine too brightly. Public speaking wasn't supposed to be about me. It was supposed to be about the SEALs. But I had a story, one that connected with people, and I always made sure to share it. Did I say too much? Did I make us look bad? Was this the moment I got told to pack my shit and find the door? I closed my eyes, leaned back against the wall, and tried to slow my breathing. No chance. My palms were slick, my heart was pounding, and my mind was stuck on repeat. What the hell does he want? My path to this moment hadn't exactly been smooth. Ultraman had been a shit show in parts, sure, but it wasn't a disaster. I still raised a hell of a lot of money for families in need and put the SEALs in a good light with the press. That had to count for something, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I'd flown too close to the sun. Admiral Winters was no ordinary leader. He was a 2-star admiral and the top man at Naval Special Warfare Command. This guy didn't just run the show. He was the show. And now he wanted a word with me, the scrappy enlisted guy who didn't always stick to the script. Sweat pooled under my uniform. My jaw clenched tight enough to crack a molar. The hallway felt like it was closing in. And when the door finally opened, I stood up so fast I nearly knocked my chair over. It was time to face whatever was coming. As Admiral Winters spoke, it became clear that this meeting wasn't just about me. It was about the future of the SEAL teams. It wasn't every day you had a 2-star admiral breaking down recruitment strategy. And the weight of the moment hit me like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just asking for help. He was asking me to step up in a way that could ripple across generations. We need to do better, he said. And I think you can help us change the narrative. He didn't mince words about the challenges. The SEAL teams prided themselves on being the best of the best. And while the military loved to tout its meritocratic ideals, the numbers told a different story. Only 1% of the SEALs were black, a glaring disparity compared to the general population. That wasn't just a coincidence. It was a systemic failure to reach the right people in the right places. You're in a unique position. Goggins. Winters continued. You've got a story that resonates. You're proof that someone from the outside, someone who doesn't fit the mold, can rise through the ranks and make a real impact. We need more of that. I sat there, still as a statue, processing his words. For all the pride I took in what I'd accomplished, I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I knew what it felt like to be underestimated, to be overlooked, to fight tooth and nail for every inch of progress. If there was anyone who could speak to those experiences and reach the men Admiral Winters was talking about, it was me. But man, this wasn't just about speeches or flashy recruitment ads. It was about going into communities that had been written off, finding the next generation of warriors, and showing them that the SEAL teams weren't just for people who fit a certain mold. They were for anyone willing to push themselves beyond their limits. Admiral, I said, finally finding my voice, I'm in. He nodded, his expression unreadable. But there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. Good, because this isn't going to be easy. We're asking you to take on something that's bigger than any one person, but I think you're up for it. Man, as I walked out of his office that day, I felt a shift. This wasn't just about my journey anymore. It was about paving the way for others. The road ahead would be tough. But if there was one thing I'd learned, it was this: the hardest missions are the ones that matter most. When Admiral Winters passed me the baton that day, I knew this wasn't about formality or protocol. It was about breaking down walls and making a real connection. The weight of the moment pressed against me, but so did my determination. These young men needed to hear the truth, unvarnished and raw, from someone who had been through the fire and emerged stronger on the other side. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and scanned the team. The suspicion was palpable, but I wasn't there to win them over with charm or polished rhetoric. I was there to give them something real. Look, I began, my voice cutting through the tension. I get it. You see 2 guys in uniform, and you probably think we're here to sell you on some bullshit fairy tale about honor, glory, and patriotism. But that's not why I'm here. The players shifted uncomfortably, their skepticism softening just enough for me to keep going. I'm here because I've been where you are, standing at a crossroads, wondering what the hell I'm supposed to do with my life. And I'm not going to lie to you. The road I chose wasn't easy. It broke me down, tore me apart, and forced me to rebuild myself piece by piece. But you know what? It also gave me a purpose, a mission, and a reason to get up every damn day and push harder than I ever thought I could. I saw a few heads nod, just barely, but it was enough to know I was getting through. So I pressed on. You might think the SEAL teams aren't for you. Hell, you might not even think the military's for you. But I'm here to tell you that if you've got heart, if you've got grit, if you've got that fire inside you that refuses to die, then you've got what it takes. And we need men like you. Strong men, smart men, men who aren't afraid to step up when the world's falling apart. By the time I finished, the suspicion in their eyes had given way to something else. Curiosity, maybe even respect. Admiral Winters nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that I'd done my job. That day wasn't about recruiting an entire team or changing every mind on that field. It was about planting a seed. Because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to take the leap, and the ripple effect can change everything. From the moment I started sharing my story, I knew it wasn't just about filling seats in the Navy SEAL teams. It was about inspiring transformation. I laid myself bare telling those athletes everything. The struggles, the failures, the doubts, and the pain, but also the triumphs and lessons learned along the way. I wanted them to know that greatness isn't born. It's forged in the fire of adversity. I told them we were looking for more than muscles and speed. We wanted resilience, heart, and a relentless drive to grow. Men who could take a punch from life, get back up and keep fighting. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them it would hurt like hell, and they'd want to quit. But that was the point. Growth doesn't come without struggle. By the time I finished, the silence was deafening. It wasn't because they were stunned. It was because they were listening, truly listening, maybe for the first time in their lives. Admiral Winters wasn't exaggerating when he said you could have heard a pin drop. After that day, the Navy gave me the green light to run my mission my way. I crafted my message to resonate beyond the SEAL teams. Most people couldn't imagine becoming a Navy SEAL, so I broadened the scope. My speeches became about potential, about breaking past limitations and proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. I emphasized that even if the military wasn't their path, they could still transform their lives by embracing hardship and seeking out challenges. Excuses were invalid. My story was proof of that. I wasn't just recruiting SEALs. I was delivering hope. From 2007 to 2009, I poured everything I had into this mission. I spent 250 days a year on the road, speaking to 500,000 people. I visited inner city high schools where hope was in short supply, and addressed historically Black colleges and universities where skepticism toward the military was high. I reached out to every culture and community, planting seeds of belief. What set me apart wasn't just the speeches. It was the way I lived the message. Teenagers are natural bullshit detectors, and they could tell I wasn't just talking, I was walking the walk. Every town I visited, I made sure to run an ultramarathon, an equally grueling race. My training runs and races weren't just personal challenges. They were part of my strategy. I wanted to show them that the Navy SEAL ethos wasn't just words. It was a lifestyle, a relentless pursuit of excellence. I'd gone from being a kid who couldn't say his name in front of 20 classmates without stuttering, to someone inspiring thousands, showing them what was possible when you push beyond your comfort zone. That was my mission, to turn doubt into belief and potential into action. My life was a constant balancing act. On the surface, it looked like I was juggling 2 full-time jobs, my responsibilities as a recruiter for the Navy SEALs and my commitment to training for the ultramarathon circuit. But beneath the surface, I was pushing myself harder than most people could imagine. My schedule was relentlessly packed. 50 hours a week at my day job, plus all the hours dedicated to preparing for and competing in ultra races. The training was in addition to, not instead of my work. I was on the road constantly. Every month, I spoke at over 45 schools. And for each of those appearances, I had to file an after-action report AR that tracked everything. How many kids I spoke to, how many events I organized, and most importantly, how many students showed genuine interest in joining the SEALs. These reports went straight to my captain and the admiral, so I knew I had to stay on top of every detail. I quickly realized that I was my own best advertisement. I didn't just talk the talk. I walked the walk. I'd show up to schools dripping with sweat after running 50 miles to get there, wearing my SEAL shirt with the trident proudly displayed. Or I'd start my speech by doing push-ups for 5 minutes, or roll out a pull-up bar and perform pull-ups while talking. It wasn't a gimmick, it was my life. The extreme stuff you see me doing now on social media, it's not new. I'd been living this lifestyle for over a decade. Wherever I went, I'd invite the kids who were interested to join me in training, whether before or after school, or even to crew for me during my ultra races. The word spread, and before long, the local media was showing up to cover my appearances, especially when I was running between cities on tight schedules. Every day I had to be sharp. I had to look the part, well-groomed, articulate, and ready to perform in every race I entered. It wasn't just about recruiting. It was about proving I could back up everything I was preaching. One of the most intense weeks of my life was when I landed in Colorado. For the Leadville 100 trail race, the highest altitude ultramarathon in the world. The school year had just started, and I had to fit everything in between speaking at schools and training for the race. I mapped out the 5 schools on my schedule, making sure each one was close enough to the trails I wanted to hike and run. Each day I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and drive to a trailhead to meet students who wanted to train with me. By 4 a.m., we'd be power hiking up one of Colorado's 14-hour summits above 14,000 feet, then sprinting down to build our quads. At 9 a.m., I'd hit another school to speak, then work out with the football, track, or swim teams before heading back to the mountains for more training until sunset. This wasn't just about recruitment. It was about pushing myself to my limits and proving that with discipline and hard work, anything was possible. Every race, every training session, every speech was an opportunity to show the world what it took to be a Navy SEAL. The Leadville 100 race started at 4 a.m. on a Saturday in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. Leadville, a small working-class ski town, sits at an elevation of over 10,000 feet. The race took us over trails ranging from 9,200 feet to 12,600 feet, testing every ounce of stamina and mental toughness we had. I finished at 2 a.m. on Sunday. Not my best race, landing in 14th place instead of the top 5, but I still finished strong. At the finish line, a teenager from Denver, who'd been at one of my earlier talks, was waiting for me. He'd driven 2 hours just to see me finish. I didn't have a great race, but it didn't matter to him. He was there for the bigger picture, the inspiration, the belief that if I could do it, so could he. My performance didn't affect him the way it might have affected other racers or spectators. What mattered to him was that I'd opened his eyes to a new world of possibility, one where limits could be pushed and dreams could be realized. As I cooled down, he asked me for tips so he could one day run for hours on end through the mountains just like I had. That moment stuck with me because it reinforced the reality. You never know who you're inspiring, who's watching your journey, and who's ready to take the next step because of your actions. This wasn't an isolated incident. After the McNaughton Park Trail Race, a 150-mile race in Peoria, Illinois, more than a dozen kids came out to pace and crew for me. In Minot, North Dakota, I trained with 24 students who braved the brutal cold of January, running on the frozen tundra at 20 below zero. One particularly powerful experience was when I spoke at a school in a majority Black neighborhood in Atlanta. Afterward, a mother approached me with her 2 sons who had long dreamed of becoming Navy SEALs but kept that dream to themselves because the military wasn't considered cool in their community. They didn't have a model to follow, someone who looked like them, someone who could show them what was possible. But after hearing my story, they asked for help, and I flew them to San Diego during their summer vacation. They trained with me. Waking up at 4 a.m. to face grueling beach workouts, just like I had during SEAL training, it was tough, and they didn't enjoy it at the time, but they learned what it really takes to live the ethos. Man, no matter where I went, whether the kids were interested in a military career or not, they always asked me one question. Do I have what it takes? Could they run 100 miles in one day? What would it take to reach their full potential? The answer I gave them is simple but powerful. Our culture is obsessed with quick fixes, hacks, and efficiency. We're always searching for that shortcut that will deliver the biggest reward with the least amount of effort. And while that might work for some superficial success, it won't build resilience, a callous mind, or the kind of self-mastery that leads to greatness. Those things come from doing the hard work day in and day out, without shortcuts or easy outs. It's about grinding through the toughest challenges, pushing beyond what you thought you were capable of, and developing the mental toughness to keep going even when it seems impossible. If you want to master your mind and eliminate any limitations, you have to become addicted to hard work. Passion, obsession, and even talent are just tools, but without the work ethic to back them up, they're useless. For me, my work ethic is the single most important factor in all of my accomplishments. Everything else is secondary. When it comes to hard work, I live by the 40% rule. A 40-hour work week is just 40% of what you're capable of. It might be enough for some, but that's just mediocrity, and mediocrity doesn't lead to greatness. Don't settle for the bare minimum. There are 168 hours in a week. That means you have the time to put in the extra hours at work without neglecting your health or relationships. It means optimizing your nutrition, spending quality time with your family, and structuring your life like you're on a 24-hour mission every single day. The biggest excuse I hear from people about why they don't work out enough is that they don't have time. We all have work obligations, and nobody wants to lose sleep. Family time is non-negotiable, or they'll flip out. I get it. But here's the key. You must win the morning. When I was active duty with the SEALs, I knew the only way to make everything fit was to maximize the time before dawn when my wife was still asleep. My gear was always ready the night before, my lunch was packed, and my work clothes were stashed at the office. I was out the door by 4 a.m. for a 6 to 10 mile run. I'd be back by 5:15 a.m. Then I'd ride my bike to work. 25 miles. At work, I'd put in a full day from 7:30 a.m. to noon eating lunch at my desk. During my break, I'd hit the gym or go for a 4 or 6 mile beach run. I worked the afternoon shift. Then rode my bike home another 25 miles. By 7 p.m., I'd have logged about 15 miles of running, 50 miles on the bike, and a full day at the office. Dinner was always at home with my family, and I was in bed by 10 p.m. ready to repeat it the next day. On Saturdays, I'd sleep in until 7 a.m., hit a 3-hour workout, and then spend the rest of the day with my wife, Kate. Sundays were for active recovery, low-intensity rides, keeping my heart rate below 110 beats per minute to stimulate healthy blood flow and give my body the recovery it needed. The truth is, you have time. It's all about how you structure your day. You just need the commitment to make it happen, to push beyond the 40%, to put in the effort every single day. It's about creating a schedule where everything gets done. Because when you put the work in, you start to break through barriers and accomplish more than you ever thought possible. Maybe you think I'm a special case or just an obsessive maniac. I won't argue with that. But let me tell you about my friend Mike. He's a high-power financial advisor in New York City, and his job is as demanding as it gets. His work days are longer than most people's, and he has a wife and 2 kids. On top of all that, he's an ultra runner. Here's how he does it. Mike wakes up at 4 a.m. every day. While his family is still asleep, he runs for 60 to 90 minutes. Then he rides his bike to work and back, and after getting home, he fits in a quick 30-minute treadmill run. On weekends, he goes for longer runs, but he makes sure they don't interfere with his family time. Despite being extremely successful and wealthy, he doesn't just coast. He stays hard because his hard work is what brings him the most satisfaction. Mike manages to get it all in by eliminating the bullshit that clutters up most people's schedules. His priorities are crystal clear, and when it's time to focus on something, he gives it his full attention. This is the way I live my life too. There's no room for wasted hours. Think about your own life. We all waste so much time on meaningless stuff. Social media, TV, aimless conversations. If you tracked how much time you spend on these activities, you'd probably be shocked at how much of your life it consumes. You should track it. Because if you did, you'd immediately realize you need to get rid of distractions. Deactivate your Facebook, cut out unnecessary cable channels. Stop wasting time on things that don't move you forward. When you find yourself stuck in frivolous conversations or activities that don't benefit you, just walk away. For years, I've lived like a monk. My circle is small. I don't spend time with many people. And I only post on social media once or twice a week. I don't check other people's feeds because I don't follow anyone. It's just how I operate. I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme. Maybe our goals aren't the same. But if you're reading this, I know you have goals too. And I can guarantee you that if you audit your schedule, you find wasted time that could be spent on work, improving yourself and achieving your goals. You just have to make the choice to eliminate the bullshit. It's up to you to take control and make those tough decisions. Once you've got a clear picture of your schedule, block everything into windows of time. When you see how your day is structured, you'll better understand where you have room to squeeze in more productive activities. If your goal isn't fitness but starting your own business, learning a language, or mastering an instrument, the same rule applies. Analyze your schedule, eliminate time-wasting habits, and see what's left. Maybe it's an hour a day. Maybe it's 3. Once you know, maximize that time. Break your day down into prioritized tasks. You can even go as far as breaking your day down into 15-minute blocks. And don't forget to plan for transitions. Your task might run over, so have backstops in place. If one task runs late, be prepared to transition smoothly into the next one. Man, use your smartphone wisely. Don't let it distract you with nonsense. Set alarms and use your calendar for productivity, not for scrolling through social media. Audit your life, cut out the bullshit, and incorporate backstops into your schedule. You'll find time for everything you need and want to do. But don't forget rest. Schedule it in. Listen to your body. Take power naps if needed, and make sure you're taking one full rest day every week. On that rest day, truly let your mind and body recover. Turn off your phone, shut down your computer. It's not a day to get lost in technology or to stay glued to your desk. A real rest day means relaxing, spending time with family and friends, eating well, and drinking well so you can recharge and hit the ground running when it's fucking over. Remember, the 24-hour mission is about keeping up a championship pace. Not for a year or a season, but for your entire life. That means you need quality rest and recovery. There is no finish line. You'll always have weaknesses to strengthen and more to learn. If you want to be tough enough to endure any challenge and finish strong, then make rest and recovery a part of the process. In 2008, I returned to Kona for the Ironman World Championships. At this point, I was in peak visibility mode for the Navy SEALs, and Commander Keith Davis, one of the best athletes I ever saw in the SEAL teams, and I were set to race. NBC Sports was tracking our every move, and we had our own race within the race, one the announcers could cut to in between tracking the main contenders. Our entrance could have been straight out of a Hollywood pitch meeting. While most athletes were deep into their pre-race rituals, psyching themselves up for the longest day of their lives, Commander Davids and I buzzed overhead in the C-130. We jumped from 1,500 feet, parachuted into the water, and were scooped up by a Zodiac to be motored ashore. All just 4 minutes before the gun went off. That gave us barely enough time for a quick blast of energy gel, a sip of water, and a change into our Navy SEAL triathlon suits. As you might guess, I'm not fast in the water. Commander Davids left me in the dust during the 2.4-mile swim. On the bike, though, I was just as strong as he was, but my lower back seized up during the ride, forcing me to stop and stretch out. By the time I pulled into the transition area after the 112-mile bike ride, Davids had a 30-minute lead on me. During the marathon, I didn't make up much time early on. My body was rebelling, and I had to walk those first few miles, but I stayed in the fight. At mile 10, I found a rhythm, and that's when I started to close the gap. Somewhere ahead of me, Davids had hit his wall, and I started to reel him in. For a while, I could see him struggling in the distance, suffering in the lava fields, his body battling the heat and the terrain. I knew he wanted to beat me. He's a proud man. He's an officer, a great operator, and a stud athlete. I wanted to beat him too. That's the mentality of a Navy SEAL. I could have blown past him, but as I got closer, I told myself to humble up. I caught up to him with just over 2 miles to go. He looked at me half exhausted, half impressed, with a mix of respect and exasperation. "Fucking Goggins," he said, smiling. "We started the race together, and now we were going to finish it together." We ran side by side for the last 2 miles, crossed the finish line, and hugged it out. It made for great television. At that point, everything in my life was going well. My career was polished and successful. I had a name for myself in the sports world, and I had plans to get back onto the battlefield where I felt I truly belonged. But here's the thing. Sometimes, even when you're doing everything right, storms come. Chaos shows up out of nowhere, and it multiplies, often without warning. When that happens, and it will, there won't be much you can do to stop it. If you're lucky, the issues or injuries you face are relatively minor. But when those setbacks occur, it's up to you to adjust and stay after it. If you're unable to work on your primary passion due to an injury or some other complication, redirect your energy elsewhere. The activities we pursue are often things we're naturally good at, and it's easy to enjoy what we're already good at. Very few people enjoy working on their weaknesses. For example, if you're a runner and you get a fucking knee injury that keeps you from running for 12 weeks, that's the perfect time to dive into yoga. By improving your flexibility and strength, you'll become a better and less injury-prone athlete. The key is not letting setbacks shatter your focus or change your mindset. Instead, always be ready to adjust, recalibrate, and keep moving forward to get better. The reason I work out the way I do isn't to prepare for ultra races or competitions. I don't have an athletic motive. It's about preparing my mind for life. Life itself is the toughest endurance sport. When you train hard, get uncomfortable, and toughen your mind, you become a more adaptable competitor. You train to find a way forward no matter the circumstances, because sometimes life will throw challenges that aren't minor. Sometimes life will hit you right in the heart. In 2009, my 2-year stint on recruitment duty was almost over. While I enjoyed inspiring the next generation, I was ready to return to active duty in the field. But before I left, I planned one more big challenge. I would ride my bike from San Diego to Annapolis, Maryland, in the legendary race across America. The race, set for June, would take about 2 weeks to complete with very little sleep. To prepare, I spent every free moment from January to May on the bike. I'd wake up at 4 a.m., ride 110 miles before work, and ride another 20 to 30 miles home after a long workday. On weekends, I'd log at least one 200-mile ride and average over 700 miles per week. I was preparing for the toughest athletic challenge of my life. Then in early May, everything went wrong. My heart started to malfunction almost overnight. For years, my resting heart rate had been in the 30s, but suddenly it shot up to the 70s and 80s. Any activity sent my heart racing, and I felt like I was going to collapse. A 5-minute bike ride would make my heart spike to 150 beats per minute. It would pound uncontrollably, even after walking up a single flight of stairs. I initially thought it was due to overtraining. I went to the doctor, who agreed but still scheduled an echocardiogram at Balboa Hospital just to be safe. When I went in for the test, the technician started the process, applying the gel and rolling the monitor over my chest to check my heart. He was a talker and spent time chatting away about nothing while he examined my heart chambers and valves. Everything looked solid, the tech said, until about 45 minutes into the procedure, when the chatter stopped. Instead, I heard clicking and zooming sounds. Then the technician left the room and came back with another tech. They clicked, zoomed, and whispered to each other, but didn't clue me in on what was going on. When people in white coats treat your heart like a puzzle they're trying to solve right in front of you, it's impossible not to think something is seriously wrong. Part of me wanted answers immediately because I was scared as hell. But I didn't want to show fear, so I kept my cool and let them do their thing. A few minutes later, 2 men walked in. One of them a cardiologist. He took over the wand, rolling it across my chest as he examined the monitor. After a quick glance, he patted me on the shoulder like I was some intern and said, "Okay, let's talk. You have an atrial septal defect," he said, walking me out into the hallway as techs and nurses bustled around, disappearing into other rooms and reappearing. I just stared ahead, trying to process his words. He quickly realized I had no idea what that meant. "You have a hole in your heart?" he explained, furrowing his brow and stroking his chin. "A pretty good sized one, too. Holes don't just open in your heart, do they?" I asked, confused. "No," he chuckled. "You were born with it." He explained that the hole was in the wall between my right and left atria. The problem with that is when there's a hole between the chambers of your heart. Oxygenated blood mixes with non-oxygenated blood. Oxygen is crucial for every single cell in our body, and without enough of it, things start to go wrong. According to the doctor, I was only getting about half of the oxygen my muscles and organs needed to function properly. This caused swelling in my feet and abdomen, heart palpitations, and bouts of shortness of breath. That explained the fatigue I had been feeling recently. It also impacts your lungs. The cardiologist continued. It floods the pulmonary blood vessels with more blood than they can handle, making it much harder for your body to recover from exertion and illness. I couldn't help but flash back to all the struggles I had with recovery after contracting double pneumonia during my first Hell Week. The fluid in my lungs never fully went away, and even after entering ultra races, I found myself coughing up phlegm during and after finishing races. Some nights I had so much fluid in me that I couldn't sleep. I'd sit up and spit into empty Gatorade bottles, wondering when that fucking cycle would finally end. Most people who are ultra obsessed tend to deal with overuse injuries, but their cardiovascular systems are usually finely tuned. Even though I had achieved so much with a fucking broken body, I never felt great. I'd learned to endure and push through, but I never truly felt like I was functioning at my best. As the doctor continued explaining the situation, I realized for the first time in my life just how lucky I'd been. Not the kind of luck you're thrilled about, but the kind where you have a hole in your heart and feel a sense of gratitude that it hasn't killed you yet. Having an ASD-like mind meant that when I dove deep underwater, gas bubbles that should have been filtered by the lungs might leak from the hole and recirculate, creating embolisms that could block blood vessels in the brain, leading to a stroke or cardiac arrest. It was like having a dirty bomb floating inside me, never knowing when or where it might fucking go off. I wasn't the only one with this condition. 1 in every 10 children is born with an ASD, and most of those holes close on their own. In about 2,000 children a year, surgery is needed, but is usually performed before a child starts school, thanks to better screening these days. For many people my age who were born with an ASD, they left the hospital without knowing the potentially deadly condition they had until their heart started causing problems in their 30s. If I had ignored the warning signs, I could have dropped fucking dead during a simple run. This is why, if you're in the military and have an ASD diagnosis, you're prohibited from jumping out of airplanes or scuba diving. If anyone had known about my condition, the Navy would never have allowed me to become a SEAL. It's a miracle I made it through Hell Week, Badwater, and all the other races. The doctor was amazed. I'm truly amazed you could do all you've done with this condition, he said. I nodded, but to me it wasn't a medical marvel. It wasn't about talent or genetics. It was just proof of what's possible when you dedicate yourself fully to harnessing the power of your mind. I was running on a heart that was perpetually half full, and yet I had accomplished all of that. 3 days later, I went into surgery, and let's just say it didn't go smoothly. The anesthesia didn't fully take, so I was half awake as the surgeon sliced in my inner thigh, inserted a catheter into my femoral artery, and guided it up to my heart. There, he deployed a helix patch to close the hole. Meanwhile, they had a camera down my throat, and I could feel it as I gagged and fought through the 2-hour procedure. After all that, I was supposed to be done with my troubles. The doctor explained that it would take time for my heart tissue to grow around the patch and seal it. After a week, he cleared me for light exercise. Roger that. I thought, as I dropped to the floor and did a set of push-ups as soon as I got home. Almost immediately after the surgery, my heart went into atrial fibrillation, or a fib. My pulse spiked from 120 to 230, then back to 120 and up to 250, all without any rhythm. I felt dizzy and had to sit down watching the numbers on my heart rate monitor while my breathing slowly returned to normal. My resting heart rate remained in the 80s. Fucking nothing had changed. I called the cardiologist, who brushed it off as a minor side effect, something to be expected. I took him at his word and rested a few more days. Then I went for a light ride home from work. At first things seemed fine, but after about 15 miles, my heart went into a fib again. The pulse bounced from 120 to 230 and back again, with no rhythm whatsoever. Kate drove me straight to Balboa Hospital, where, after several opinions, it became clear that the patch had either failed or wasn't big enough to cover the hole, meaning I would need a second heart surgery. The Navy didn't want any part of that. They feared more complications and recommended that I scale back my lifestyle, accept my new normal, and retire. Yeah, right. Instead, I found a better doctor who suggested we wait several months before considering another surgery. For now, I couldn't jump or dive and obviously couldn't operate in the field, so I stayed in recruitment. It was a different life, and I was tempted to feel sorry for myself. But I knew that if I allowed myself to fall into a victim's mentality, I wouldn't get anything out of this situation. I wasn't going to sit at home defeated all day. Instead, I used the time to perfect my recruitment presentation. I focused on writing up ARs and became more detail-oriented in my administrative duties. It might have sounded boring, but it was honest, necessary work. And it kept my mind sharp, prepared for the day when I could drop back into the fight, if I was fucking ever allowed to. 14 months after the first surgery, I was once again rolling through a hospital corridor on my back, headed for pre-op. The techs and nurses shaved me down and prepped me while I thought about all I'd accomplished in the military. I wondered if it had been enough. If the docs couldn't fix me this time, would I be willing to retire satisfied? That question gnawed at me as the anesthesiologist placed the oxygen mask over my face and counted down softly in my ear. And then just before I drifted off, the answer echoed from the depths of my fucking soul. No. Stay hard.